If you're looking for a guitar that actually lives up to the promise of being reliable, comfortable enough to play every night, and worth every penny you spend, you've probably already felt the sting of a great-looking instrument that just doesn't hold up in the real world. You've watched videos, read spec sheets, maybe even tried a couple of models in a store, only to wonder whether the next purchase will finally feel right. The risk of ending up with a guitar that sounds good on paper but feels awkward on stage is why a lot of players hesitate before hitting add to cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Gretsch G6128T 89VS Vintage Select 89 Duo Jet is the kind of instrument that tries to bridge that gap between vintage vibe and modern playability. It's not marketed as a monster shredder or a studio-only piece of gear. Instead, it leans into the classic Gretsch aesthetic while promising a level of day-to-day usability that most boutique-style guitars struggle to deliver. With just 6 verified ratings and an average of 4.6 stars, the early owners seem to agree that it hits most of the marks they were hoping for. First, let's talk about the body. The Duo Jet uses a chambered mahogany construction, which is a clever way of shedding weight without sacrificing the resonance you'd expect from a solid piece of wood. In a live setting, that translates to less fatigue when you're on your feet for hours, and it also helps the instrument stay balanced when you're standing with a strap. I've heard guitarists describe the tone as warm but still punchy, which makes sense because the chambers give the mahogany a slightly more open, airy response while still retaining its natural low-end thump. The maple neck is another practical piece of the puzzle. Maple tends to stay stable through temperature swings, so you won't find yourself constantly readjusting the truss rod after a gig in a hot club. The neck profile on the 89 Duo Jet is slim enough for players who like to move up and down the fretboard quickly, yet it still feels substantial when you're bending strings. The Rosewood Fingerboard adds a touch of slickness under your fingertips, reducing the squeak you sometimes get with unfinished maple tops, and the 22-fret layout gives you enough range for both rhythm chops and higher melodic runs. Now, the pickups. Gretsch equips this model with 2 humbucking pickups, which is a departure from the classic single-coil twang most people associate with the brand. In practice, that means you get a thicker, more modern output without losing the character that makes a Gretsch sound distinct. When you dial in a clean tone, the neck humbucker delivers that smooth, buttery sound that sits nicely in a mix for indie or folk rock recordings. Push the pickup selector forward, and the bridge humbucker adds a bit more bite, which works well for overdriven blues or classic rock riffs. The downside. If you're after razor-sharp high-gain tones for metal or hard rock, the Duo Jet's voicing might feel a bit rounded, and you could end up needing a pedal to push it into the aggressive territory you want. One of the most talked-about features on any Gretsch is the Bigsby Vibrato tailpiece. On the 89 Duo Jet, the Bigsby is finished in black to match the sleek body, and it's functional enough for subtle pitch modulation without the tuning instability that can plague cheaper tremolo systems. In a real-world setting, a quick dive bomb on a chord or a gentle warble on a sustained note adds that vintage flavor you hear on classic rock recordings. However, the Bigsby does require a bit of care. If you're not used to setting it up, the spring tension can feel loose at first, and you might notice the strings slipping slightly after heavy use. A simple adjustment tightening the spring or ensuring the strings are properly seated usually solves the issue, but it's something you need to be aware of before you head into a gig. From a practical standpoint, the Duo Jet's finish is a glossy black that hides fingerprints relatively well, but it's also prone to showing scratches if you tend to bang the guitar around on stage. The hardware is solid, and the tuning machines hold their pitch through a typical set of chords, but you'll still want to keep an eye on the intonation after a few weeks of heavy playing. That said, the overall cost of the instrument puts it in a sweet spot. You're paying for a reputable brand and a set of features that would